Welcome to the 2021 Shaw Classic results and complete event-by-event recap. Starting off with the max log. Jerry Pritchett zeroed the max log, coming in, according to Terry Hollins, 50 pounds down due to various injuries and maybe nursing a shoulder injury this time around. We then move up to Gabriel Pena, who appeared to sit in his dip maybe a little bit too long before the press attempt, but who knows, maybe that approach works for him, zeroing out also at 380-pound opening weight. We then move on to Gabriel Rayome. Yes, that is how it's pronounced, despite the way that the commentator Brian Hightower was pronouncing it. It is Rayome. He could not lock out on 380 pounds. We then move on to Mikhail Shivlikov, who earned 7.5 points and was able to press the 400-pound max log. The 380 was done with medium difficulty, not too bad. He seemed very happy about it. He walked around a bit before locking it out on 400, and then made fun of himself and did a little dance afterwards. So Shivlikov, win, lose, or draw, always wonderful to watch and super entertaining. After the 420-pound fail, he did point to his tricep like he had a little bit of an injury, and we'll talk more about that later. We then move on to Konstantin Janasha, who also earned 7.5 points by completing the 400-pound log. He was comfortable at 380, a little difficult on the 400-pound lockout, and that's as far as he went. Ivar Smockstellis also earned 7.5 points, and he was the most confident guy of 380 of everyone. He was smooth on every part of the lift of the clean and press. 420 seemed way harder than his last two, and then he did miss that one, but the 380 and the 400 seemed super confident for him, 7.5 points. Maxime Boudreau also earned 7.5 points for a 400-pound successful lift. Not as easy at 380 as I would have expected for his overhead pressing power, but he is having shoulder injuries as well, or shoulder issues. He had a broken finger coming in, so still a very good lift given what he was going through. He failed 2 presses on the first clean at 420 and then failed it altogether, so 400 pounds for him. Adam Bishop, also 7.5 points on the max log, also pressing 400 pounds, a little bit better than what I would have expected for Adam. As you see in my prediction, I predicted him last at this event, so he did improve quite a bit from what I've seen in the past. He had a bobble on the clean at 380, but he got it on his second try. He was perfectly smooth at 400 pounds, and then Magnus made him do it again because I felt Magnus was slow on the down signal. Adam Bishop had it up, had it locked for the normal amount of time, in my opinion, and Magnus made him do it again, and Adam did it again. Then he ends up failing at 420, and then backed away like it bit him. It was really funny. There were a few different points like that in the competition. JF had something like that on the car squat where he did his last rep and ran away from it. Just interesting to watch. We then had Evan Singleton also earning 7.5 points, easy at the 380-pound opener, easy at the 400-pound next max log weight, and then 3 press attempts on clean 1, and then he tried a second clean 2 at 420 and failed there. Then moving up to Kevin Ferris, also 7.5 points. So we had a lot of guys who successfully did 400 pounds, but not 420 on the max log. The lockout was a little slow at 380, but he got it. He got the down signal before locking out one arm at 400, in my opinion, but he still locked it out. So I think Magnus kind of gave him a slightly early down signal, but then Kevin continued with the motion and locked it out anyway, so it's not as if he couldn't have done it. So 7.5 points for him. Brian Shaw, the host of the event, also 7.5 points on max log. He had a slight bounce at the top of 380, so had it almost there and kind of bounced and got his lockout perfectly within the rules, but just an interesting technique. So, and he had a fair lockout, no questions about the lockout. Another slider bounce at 400, got that locked out as well. 2 cleans at 420, but was not able to press 420 this time around this year. I believe he did 440 last year. Big Z Zydrunas Savickas is the next tier up in point standings on the max log here, 12.5 points. So great to see Z coming back in peak form, at least for overhead pressing. So a little later we'll find out he kind of bowed out of the day 2 events due to some potential injuries, but max log he did really well. He didn't look locked out to me on 380, but maybe his arms just don't go any further. He got the signal. His left arm seemed to be rolling forward when he got the down call on 400. So again, in my opinion, kind of 2 potentially questionable good calls on lockouts. But hey, he's Big Z, gets the benefit of the doubt. And maybe that first one, again, his arms were locked out and just in a different position than I'm used to seeing. He had no more attempts after 420, so he did get 420 successfully, 420 pounds, and decided not to make any more attempts after that. He seemed to be, at least from what the commentators were saying, having some shoulder injuries going on. JF Carone also hits 420 pounds for 12.5 points. He had a tough lockout on 380, and then 400 looked way easier for some reason, so maybe he was still warming up into his movements. 420 was as easy as 400 for him, and he had one attempt at 440, and then he decided kind of strategically to walk away from it. JF doesn't really mess around. Like, he makes his attempt, and he knows right away if he can do it or not, and waved it off and walked away. So there isn't a lot of wasted energy coming from him. Then moving up to the next kind of tier of points is Graham Hicks, who walks away with 14 points here. So I thought Graham was going to win this event. He got very close to it, but didn't quite win the event. So he strict pressed 380. He passed 400 pounds. He strict pressed 420. And then 440 actually looked strict to me, pretty strict. Like he had a dip in the shoulder, but still really no leg drive. And we come to learn later, maybe it's because his groin injury might have been re-aggravated and he couldn't use leg drive, but what he did with strict pressing was absolutely out of this world. So he tried to strict press 455, went off balance a little bit, and then missed his second try. So again, at first I'm thinking, like, why is he trying to strict press it? Just use whatever mechanism you can to get it up. But again, I think it may have been his groin aggravating him again, and he just couldn't use a full movement. So 440 pounds for 14 points for Graham Hicks. We then move up to the guys that tied for first. So you'll see it's 15.5 points and not 16, and that means two guys tied for first at 455 pounds. So Bobby Thompson, strict press 380, looked around, took a bow, really a great showman, strict pressed 400 as well. The clean looked like he wasn't going to get 455, but then he did. He clean and pressed it fine. Bobby then decides to skip the next weight of 470 and go directly for a new American log press record at 480, and he was super close but did not quite lock it out, so ends up at 455, tied with Trey Mitchell, 15.5 points. Trey was easy at 380, 400, 420, 440 looked hard, but he still got 455, and then he went to 470, not 480 like Bobby. And he failed after, I said, 2.5 clean attempts. So kind of 2 clean attempts and 1 less than full effort clean attempt. And they interviewed him later, and he said, I wanted to kind of give my full effort for the fans and for myself, but still wanted to save myself for later on in the competition. So he ends up tying with Bobby Thompson at 15.5 points on the max log. And the other note I'll say about Trey is every one of those weights looked like pretty much the same difficulty till he got to the very end. He's very smooth and deliberate with his technique, and it's great to watch. So that's the max log. Now on to the super yoke. So on the super yoke, Gabriel Pena ends up zeroing the super yoke, not able to pick it up at all. So he ends up with 0 points there. As we move up, Mikhail Shivlikov moved it about 5 feet and then couldn't continue any further. Maybe those injuries starting to pack on to him, and 2 points for him there. He was versus Kevin Ferris, by the way. So, and Pena was versus Jerry Pritchett, so they were head-to-head in the super yoke. I tried to take notes on who went against whom, because I thought you'd find it interesting, and I know you come here for all of the detailed analysis and event-by-event, competitor-by-competitor breakdown that I provide here. The other note that I'll stop and tell you right now is we were asked by the producers of the show not to share any footage, so I won't be doing that today out of respect for them. I will, however, give you all of my notes and specific detailed breakdown that I believe you will not find anywhere else on the internet, so it should paint a great picture for you and hopefully compel you to go to the Shaw Elite Club and pay the pay-per-view and watch it, because that is my goal here, to give you enough information to get you to understand how awesome of a show this was, and that for a few bucks you really should go watch it and support the athletes. So moving on up the list, we had 3 points going to Jerry Pritchett. So he dropped it once on lap 1 of 2. So basically the super yoke was out a distance, turn around, and come back a distance. And so you're allowed to drop it once on each lap, so to speak. So he dropped it once on the first lap and never tried to pick it up again. Then we move on up to Maxime Boudreau. And Maxime earned 4 points here. He really struggled with the yoke, did not complete lap 1 at all. So Graham Hicks earned 5 points going up against Big Z. That was a really interesting one to watch. He had a drop on lap 1 going out, Big Z, very smooth, out and back, very powerful. His last was Bahrain. Apparently, he was injured there, and not a good indicator with my predictions at all. Really proved me wrong and did very well here. But we'll get to Big Z further up on the list. So as we move up, Kevin Ferris earned 6 points. He had an early drop on the first leg going out. He was against Mikhail Shivlikov. He muscled it through, though, and finished both laps, even after that one drop where it started to seem really difficult. 7 points go to Adam Bishop. He had a drop versus Ivars on the first leg, and then on lap 2 as well, but still finished no more drops. 8 points then went to JF Caron. So JF was very fast. He had one drop on both laps, but like near the end of both of them. So I think he kind of gave up a little bit too much time that cost him a few placings, just because at the very end he was like a foot short. So if he could have made it that last foot, I think it would have made a big difference instead of dropping it and having to pick it up again. But again, you know, he was against Maxime Boudreau, so Canada versus Canada. And then as we move up, 9 points to Gabriel Rayom. So he finished both laps with one drop right before finishing the second lap. So he did very well. 10 points went to Ivar Smokstelis. He beat Adam Bishop, and he only dropped on lap 2. There was a little bit of a slide, but nothing I would call like out of bounds or in terms of disqualification or anything like that. Like, it was a slick surface, so a few guys slid a little bit. Nobody slid on purpose, from what I could tell. Big Z came in, with, as we mentioned, with 11 points, so he had a very even performance. No drops on either lap. Looked really good on this particular event. Bobby Thompson earns 12 points against Trey Mitchell. He did very well. And then Brian Shaw coming in toward the top of the pack, 13 points for him. He was very fast versus Konstantin Janasha, but Janasha was faster out of the turn and ends up beating Brian Shaw. So you'll see him further up on the list, and here he is, 14 points to Konstantin Janasha on the Super Yoke. He beat Shaw after they were both fast, and Janasha just faster on the turnaround, Shaw taking maybe an extra second or so to set himself. And next up on our list, Trey Mitchell, near the top, had the fastest turn of anybody. He was against Bobby Thompson and did extremely well here. And then you have your winner. Evan Singleton ends up winning the Super Yoke, 16 points to him. He finished both laps versus Gabriel Rayom, no drops, and super fast. And for those of you that are wondering, the Super Yoke was heavy. It was 1,117 pounds, or 508 kilos, with, again, one drop allowed per lap, 2 laps, 75-second time limit. So now on to the bag toss over bar. In the bag toss over bar, we had 8 sandbags. So they were 2 that were 50 pounds, 2 that were 55 pounds, 2 that were 60, and 2 that were 65 pounds. Gabriel Rayom ends up with 1 point, so he was head-to-head against Ivar Smokstelis and only managed 1 of 8 bags. Jerry Pritchett comes away with 2.5 points. Big Z Zydrunas Zaviskis struggled through this one, ends up with 2.5 points. He was against Bobby Thompson, and he ends up with 2 out of 8 bags. 4 points go to Adam Bishop. Adam had a weird run here, so he had probably 10 of them that were high enough to go over, but the wrong trajectory, so they kept falling back down on the incorrect side of the bar, or the beam. It was actually a beam. So just really unlucky with his trajectory there. Walks away with 4 points, and he was going against JF Caron, who was one of the few guys to actually finish this run. Gabriel Pena comes away with 6 points. He was against Mikhail Shivlikov, and he did 4 out of 8 bags. 6 points split with Graham Hicks, who went against Kevin Ferris. 6 points also to Kevin Ferris, again, against the aforementioned Graham Hicks. 8.5 points went to Konstantin Janasha, who had 4 out of 8 bags against Brian Shaw. Brian being one of the other guys to finish the run. Again, there were 3 or 4 of them. Bobby Thompson comes away with 8.5 points. I believe he did 4 out of the 8 bags, just faster than the other guys. 11 points go to Ivar Smokstelis. He was versus Gabriel Rayom. He threw them on the run back, and he had good momentum. 6 out of 8 bags for him. So threw him on the, what I mean by threw him on the run back is he would run to the lineup of bags, grab it, and instead of running back, setting up and taking his one swing and then throwing, he would grab it with one hand and throw it as he was running back. So he gained a lot of time there, I thought, and that's why he got so many points here. 11 points being split to Evan Singleton, who went against Trey Mitchell, and I believe Evan got 6 out of 8 bags over the bar. Trey Mitchell splits that 11 points versus, again, Evan Singleton, 6 out of 8 bags for him as well. Mikhail Shivlikov comes away with 13 points. He seemed hurt after failing the last bag, but he does come away with 13 points here. 14 points to JF Carone, who finishes all 8 of the bags, almost hit the ceiling on some of them is what it looked like to me from my vantage point anyway, and looked like he was going to throw him out of the building until I saw Brian Shaw go, and they looked even higher. So Brian comes away with 15 points, second place here. I thought he would win this event. Very close, but doesn't quite win it. He goes against Konstantin Janasha, and the winner, Maxime Boudreau, gets all 8 bags in an incredible time. 16 points for him. He made quick work of all the bags and looked much faster than Jerry Pritchett. So that's how the bag toss over bars shook out. Now on to the car squat. So the car squat was 817-pound load on the athlete, right? It was a Ford Bronco, which weighs more than that, but that was considerably behind them. 817 pounds on the athlete, 4 reps in 75 seconds. So how many reps did they do? Well, Mikhail Shivlikov ended up with 0. I didn't even see him attempt this, right? And I think that at this point he's injured and kind of backed out of the competition. Only 12 out of 16 guys actually attempted this. I didn't see Jerry Pritchett attempt it either. Gabriel Pena, I didn't see him attempt it either, and he actually made an Instagram post talking about kind of taking himself out of this event so he could be his best for the Hummer Tire deadlift on day 2. And then as we move up the list, Graham Hicks did attempt it, but he looked hurt after failing on the very first rep, so he zeroed it. Might be his groin again, who knows. And he was going up against Adam Bishop. As we move our way up the list, Ivar Smokstelis also failed on the first rep. He was using narrower hands on the bar than some of the other guys, but he was against Konstantin Janasha, and Ivar's did 0 the event. Evan Singleton didn't seem to attempt it either, so he was one of the 4 guys I didn't see try this. And we found out the next day that he may have been suffering from some knee issues. They were bothering him a little bit. He still did fine on day 2, but maybe kind of saving himself and recovering a little bit. That did move him from 4th in the standings down to 9th, so it'd be interesting to do the math and see if he would have made the podium overall, if he would have done well on this, but squat not necessarily one of Evan's strong suits anyway, so maybe a good strategic approach for him. Gabriel Rayom ends up with 7 points, so he went against Big Z, and I believe he got 5 reps there, so he did start to do well. Not amongst the very best guys who did incredible numbers of reps, but we start seeing some reps here. Konstantin Janasha runs away with 9 points, so he did very well versus Ivar Smokstelis, and you'll start seeing some red numbers here on my screen, and the red numbers are because I saw scoring discrepancies. So we'll talk about that in another video where I give you the highlights and the lowlights of the show. There were a lot of both. I thought it was an incredible show. The athletes gave great performances. The production, for the most part, was incredible. The crowd energy was some of the best I've ever heard. But there were a couple of things that fell a little short of where they should have been. And so we'll talk about that in another video. But that 38 means I think Konstantin was shortchanged a point in the overall standings. And I don't believe he ever got it back. So we'll talk about that. Stay tuned for my other video there. Moving on up, Big Z Zydrunas Savickas earns 10 points on the car squat. Very wide stance. The first one looked hard, but then he got 13 reps, so did very well versus Gabriel Rayom. And my little note here with the Vroom is because Brian Hightower, the commentator, seems like I think he's actually a professional rugby commentator from what I looked up. And you can tell he's a professional commentator, not someone doing it for the first time, like, not to take any digs, but like Martins Lisi's at Worlds, for example. Told us all, this is my first time doing this, and that's why, I need to get better. This guy, Brian Hightower, you can tell is a real pro, but not necessarily as knowledgeable with strongman as, everybody else there, right? So, Gabriel Rayom, that is how you pronounce his last name. Brian Shaw actually had a video with the athletes talking about themselves before the competition started, and Gabriel pronounces his own name in that video, so was a fine opportunity to test and practice, but he kept calling him Hroom, like Hroom. Gabriel Hroom, and it's not. I have a French friend, and it's Rayom. Okay, so moving on up, 10 points also go to Maxime Boudreau, who was against Brian Shaw in the car squat. 10 points also to Bobby Thompson. He looks strong, but his last 3 reps were very hard for him. He still got 13 reps out, and he was against Kevin Ferris. As we move on up, Adam Bishop really killing this. 12 points for him. Incredible super speed. He had a wide stance. He went against Graham Hicks and just, Graham struggled, and Adam just did incredibly. I thought he was going to win this. 15 reps for him until I saw JF Carone, who comes away with 14 points. I believe he did 16 reps. And as mentioned earlier, he was very, very fast. He kind of went out as fast as he could possibly go and then ran away from it after his last rep. So that was interesting. 14 points also to Brian Shaw, who does the same number of reps, 16 reps. He had the widest stance and arms that you could imagine. I mean, his limbs are longer, but wider than everybody else. He didn't bounce on the bottom like most of the other guys. So a lot of the other guys tried to go fast, bounce at the bottom, use momentum. Brian was really deliberate. So you can give him some more credit for that, for doing stricter reps. And he was against Maxime Boudreau. We then have Trey Mitchell. Trey Mitchell earns 14 points as well, and he was against JF Caron, so that was something to see. And at this point, again, we'll talk about the scoring later, but Trey's scoring was off before this event. They had it wrong, and at this point, they fixed it again. So if you look at column AA and column AB, total and Shaw's total, you see they match now. They didn't before. 16 points then goes to the winner, Kevin Ferris, who does 20 reps on the car squat. He looked very comfortable all the way through. Maybe even had one or two more in him when he decided to stop. He was against Bobby Thompson, who also did very well, but Kevin, 20 reps. And so that is the lineup for the car squats and how everybody did there, and all my detailed notes about what I saw. To paint the picture for you, to please go ahead and make this purchase on Shaw Elite Club and watch it. It's definitely well worth the watch. Absolutely. I'll be frank with you. I joined for the month, and then I've already canceled, but it was worth my $8.99. Absolutely worth it. So for those of you that enjoy my detailed analysis about domestic competitions and want to learn a little bit more about the people putting some of them together, Garage Gym Life Media, who has been so kind as to sponsor this video, please check out John Greaves III, the founder of Garage Gym Life Media, who will now tell you a little bit more about what they're doing over there.
Training in a home gym, especially if you're training by yourself, can be tough because sometimes you just don't have the motivation to go in your garage or your basement and get it done. And that's why we stream competitions every month on the Garage Gym Life Media YouTube channel. I'm John Greaves III, founder of Garage Gym Life Media, and after 20 years of training in a home gym, I can tell you that there's some days when I just don't feel like training. And those are the days when I put on some sort of training video or other strength-related content to give me the extra motivation I need to get in there and get it done. There is nothing more motivating than seeing people achieving their goals at a powerlifting meet or a strongman competition. And that's why month after month, we provide that content to you right there in the comfort of your own home on our YouTube channel. Plus, we leave it up forever so you can always just throw it on in the background anytime you need that extra dose of motivation to get you going. And that's why, if you're not already a subscriber to Garage Gym Life Media, I invite you to take advantage of this opportunity to add this powerful training tool into your arsenal, because I want you to succeed right there in the best gym in town.
And thank you again, Garage Gym Life Media, for sponsoring us. Now let's talk about day 2, which began with the Hummer Tire Deadlift. So Mikhail Shivlikov, again, didn't see him attempt this, so obviously a 0 on the Hummer Tire Deadlift. And this was for max, just like it was last year, so starting off at 900 pounds and working its way up. Gabriel Rayom fought 900 for quite a while, but failed it. Apparently, we learned he's training with JF Caron, so maybe we'll see better things from him in the future as he develops this type of deadlift. Big Z, I did not see him attempt this, and I did not see him in day 2 at all, so possibly nursing some injuries and maybe kind of called it. But Z, I think, had 36 points after day 1, which I believe was 7th place or something like that. So did very well despite his overall standings because of the 4 zeros on day 2. He did very well for a person considered the GOAT, yes, but not in his prime, internationally speaking anymore. And then Maxime Boudreau missed at the opening weight 900, not necessarily known for deadlifting, but improving all the time. Jerry Pritchett comes away with 5.5 points. So Terry Holland said that Jerry skipped the car squat to rest for this. So we learned this on day 2. 900 looked tough off the floor for Jerry, which is not characteristic of him, but his lockout was good. He failed 2 attempts at 950 pounds and then seemed injured. He didn't even sit down as far as I would have expected for the pull. And on a higher Hummer Tire deadlift, I don't expect a full sit down into the pull, but he didn't seem to move at all. He seemed really injured. We then move up to Ivar Smokstelis, who also comes away with 5.5 points. He fails 2 attempts at 950, so he comes away with a 900-pound pull. He does do that successfully. Evan Singleton, 7.5 points for him. He has a successful 950-pound pull. So Terry said he skipped the squat due to knee trouble, as we mentioned earlier, and plenty of struggle on 950, but he got it. And then he has his signature pose at the top, And he didn't move 1,000 pounds very far at all after doing it on a traditional deadlift very recently at the World Open. So that was very interesting. I guess Hummer Tire has a dedicated technique. It's not necessarily that it's higher off the ground, so it's easier for every competitor. We then move up to Kevin Ferris, who also came away with 7.5 points. He had medium speed at 900 pounds, had to work on the bottom half of 950, but got it up, and then skipped 1,000 for some reason, and 2 attempts at 1,050 and failed. Moving up to Konstantin Janasha, he comes away with 9.5 points here. You'll see the red overall standings points at 47.5, where again, I believe he's being shortchanged a point, and we'll talk about that in a future video. He ends up pulling 1,000 pounds for Konstantin, so medium difficulty on 900. He looks stiff getting up after his 950. A decent fight throughout the movement, but still he gets the 1,000 and he fails at 1,050 pounds. Konstantin, another guy who started to really show signs of injury throughout this competition. We then move on to Bobby Thompson, who ends up with 9.5 points as well, makes 1,000 pounds. He was kind of medium fastish on 900. He skipped 950. Then he had all kinds of strap issues. His strap slipped on the first attempt, and even the second attempt where he made it successfully at 1,000 pounds. And then 1,050, he had it far over his knees, but strap trouble again and didn't lock out 1,050. Brian Shaw did, though. So he was medium slowish on 900, very wide stance. He was slow and steady on 950, smooth all the way through. He skipped 1,000 pounds. So a lot of the guys may be resting themselves for the higher weight. For some it paid off, for some it didn't. For Brian it did. He had to fight a lot for 1,050, but he showed what I would call horsepower. So if you want to talk in terms of cars with bigger engines, they can go higher speeds, right? The horsepower allows you to not necessarily accelerate faster, but go a higher top speed. And that's what I saw out of Brian. Like, he didn't go fast, but the weight was never enough to make him stop. Like, his horsepower was enough that I'll get there slow and steady, but I'll get there. So that's kind of how I saw it. He decided not to try 1,100, and I don't blame him. I don't think he had anything more left. Gabriel Pena ends up with 1,100 pounds, so jumps into the Shaw Classic scene and really makes his mark on the deadlift, skip the car squat, and a good decision for him. 13 points for Gabriel Pena. 1,100 pounds was the effort of the night, in my opinion. So definitely, I would say buy this show just to watch Gabriel Pena do 1,100 pounds. It was an incredible effort and really gave his all and locked it out. 13 points also goes to Graham Hicks for 1,100 pounds. The funny thing with him is at Graham's height, and I'm not making fun of him because I think I'm shorter, but at Graham's height, his range of motion on a Hummer Tire deadlift with such a flexible bar is almost non-existent. So it was pretty interesting to watch the difference with him and Brian deadlifting the same bar. 13 points also goes to Trey Mitchell, who is able to pull 1,100 pounds. So he had medium speed on 900, a slow start, but medium past the knees at 950. 1,000 pounds looks smoother than the past weights for him. And as I mentioned earlier, Trey just medium speed, but equally smooth on every weight. He's just very well prepared and lots of experience on the deadlift. It's great to watch Trey deadlift. Adam Bishop then ends up with 1,150 pounds for 15.5 points. And as you can see, JF Carone, last year's winner at 1,202 pounds, also splits with Adam Bishop at 15.5 points for 1,150 pounds. And here's why. So Adam Bishop ends up pulling 1,150. He ends up going for a new world record at 1,205 pounds. He's super hyped up. He misses it. JF, instead of going for it himself, decides to split the points because he knows he has joint first. And you could make an argument toward the end in the overall standings points, whether those things would have added up to a different placing or not. And we can talk about that later. But interesting how they ended up tying and how much better Adam Bishop did this year than last year on the Hummer Tire deadlift, where he already did well, possibly because he had the setup at home and was really focusing on this. So that's how the Hummer Tire deadlift at the Shaw Classic 2021 stacked up. Let's move on to the medley. So on the wheelbarrow and arm-over-arm medley, it was a 300-pound sandbag load, so they had to load 2 of the sandbags themselves into the wheelbarrow. The other sandbags were already there. They then had to walk the wheelbarrow back 40 feet. So sandbag 1 into the wheelbarrow, run back at the second one. They were each 300 pounds. Put that in the wheelbarrow for 40 feet, then walk the wheelbarrow back 40 feet, then run over to the arm over arm, which was 2,400 pounds, but 800 pounds. Sorry, Then the wheelbarrow was 2,400 pounds, which is 800 pounds in the hand. So grip came into play for some of the guys. And then 700-pound arm over arm. So how'd that shake out? Again, Shivlikov out of the competition at this point. Same for Big Z. Gabriel Pena came away with 3.5 points. So he dropped the first sandbag right before getting it into the wheelbarrow and then fell down. It seemed like a left thigh injury. So he got up to complete 2 sandbag loads, but that's all he could do versus Brian Shaw. Knee injuries were putting all the pressure on his hips is what we heard later, and making him crumble. So that's what the commentator Brian Hightower brought us up to speed on. So 3.5 points for Gabriel Pena for as much as he was able to do there. 3.5 points also for Constantine, clearly hobbling and in pain by this point. He finished the sandbags but couldn't finish the wheelbarrow. 5 points go to Trey Mitchell. So Trey having some grip issues with the wheelbarrow. I think he did mention that later. And Trey known for, grip being something he's still continuously working on, as opposed to overhead pressing and deadlift where he's mastered, so to speak, right? So Trey was against Graham Hicks. He was faster with the sandbags, but struggled a lot on getting the wheelbarrow up and moving. He chalked up multiple times to try to help out. He finally got to the arm over arm, but time ran out before he could move it. So the other thing that I wanted to mention is you'll see in rows AK and AL, you'll see points, which is my points, and AL, I call them Shaw's points. I know he's not keeping score himself, but whoever was keeping points gave Trey 12 points here, and it should have been 5. So I don't know what was going on. So not only were the points wrong for this event, but Bobby and Trey were transposed. So they had the guy that was faster of the two slower, and vice versa, and almost doubled the points for both of them. Bobby broke the floor, and Trey didn't. So it was very, very interesting. So again, the green 12 means he got a gift, but in the overall standings, they didn't count it. So, in the end, it was right, but in the moment, it was confusing. You then have Bobby Thompson, who I just mentioned. They gave 11 points to. He really should have had 6. So as you see, Trey had 12, Bobby had 11, but Bobby was actually better and should have had 6, and Trey should have had 5. Then you had 7 points going to Jerry Pritchett. He was barely faster than Ivar's in the wheelbarrow, but he was faster. And then on the infographic on the screen, Big Z was listed twice on the overall leaderboard, and the 18 points seems to really have been Jerry. So this happened twice. After 2 different events, Big Z was listed twice. Once he was actually Jerry, and once he was actually Constantine. But again, we'll save that for the other highlight and low light video. 8.5 points go to Graham Hicks. So Graham was versus Trey Mitchell. He finished the arm over arm, and then, he finished the wheelbarrow, and then walked slowly over to the arm over arm, and looked especially exhausted after not finishing the arm over arm. 8.5 points to Adam Bishop as well. He was versus JF Caron, and he didn't budge the arm over arm. 10 points went to Maxime Boudreau. He was faster than Gabriel Rayom on the wheelbarrow, but couldn't finish the arm over arm even after taking oxygen before starting it off. Gabriel actually was inches away, Gabriel Rayom, from finishing it, and you'll see him a little higher on the list. Ivar Smockstellis walks away with 11 points on this event. He was a little faster than Jerry Pritchett on the sandbags, but Jerry caught him on the wheelbarrow. And then you have 12 points going to the aforementioned Gabriel Rayom. So he was beaten by Max on the wheelbarrow portion, but overtook him and was only 10 inches away from, I believe it was 10 feet. He had to raise the weight for arm over arm. So incredible performance by Gabriel Rayom, also exhausted after he was done there. JF Caron walks away with 13 points. He was versus Adam Bishop, faster on both sandbags and the wheelbarrow, and completed the arm over arm. So JF doing really well. Brian Shaw finishes the whole thing as well. Very fast on the sandbags and wheelbarrow, completes the arm over arm versus Gabriel Pena, and walks away with 14 points. 15 points go to Kevin Ferris, so he competed versus Evan Singleton, completed the whole event. He actually lost to Evan. They were both really fast, and there you go, 16 points to Evan Singleton, faster and better and more complete than everybody on this event. So Evan ends up winning 3 events in the Shaw Classic, and as you'll see, misses the podium. So that's really, really interesting. So that's how the wheelbarrow arm over arm event shook out. Let's move on to the Circus Dumbbell, the penultimate event. And a quick reminder to everybody watching, we have been asked by the producers of the show not to share any video footage, so we're going to respect that and not share it. I do hope that this detailed analysis and breakdown, event by event, competitor by competitor, does compel you to understand how exciting this show was, and that you should go over to the Shaw Classic, the Elite Club, and purchase it. I think it is still available, and watch both days of the show. Definitely well worth it. An incredible show with incredible crowd and athlete energy. So moving on to the Circus Dumbbell, we had again Misha Shivlikov not competing. Jerry Pritchett now did not compete in the circus either. Gabriel Pena did not compete in the Circus Dumbbell. Gabriel Rayom was versus Ivar Smokstelis head-to-head. He had 2 lockouts, but immediate drops, so not that like full second lockout that you like to get the down signal, so he ended up zeroing the Circus Dumbbell. Big Z, I did not see him compete, and again, there were 2 Big Zs on the leaderboard after this event. The event leaderboard, not the overall, and I believe this time he was actually Konstantin Janasha. So Graham Hicks ends up with 2 fails. He zeroes the event, and his overall total is listed at 22.5 points when it really should have been 46.5 points, his total before he zeroed this event. So again, we'll go into this in a little more detail. Konstantin Janasha did not compete in the Circus Dumbbell, and I believe there were 6 or 7 guys who did not compete in this. Konstantin's still carrying that 1 point short-changing that I picked up earlier. Maxime Boudreau ends up with 8.5 points on the Circus Dumbbell. He was versus Adam Bishop. He went to the left arm for 1 and missed, and then he did all the other reps on the right arm, so maybe having issues with the left shoulder. Adam Bishop also with 8.5 points. He had 2 nice clean reps, no issues there. 10 points went to Bobby Thompson on the Circus Dumbbell. He was against Graham Hicks. He had 3 reps, but he was grabbing his left shoulder after each one, and you'll see he was having problems with his left arm in the Atlas Stones as well later, and sort of a theme for him. Hopefully he recovers quickly. We do love Bobby Thompson on this show. Ivar Smokstelis walks away with 12 points. He was versus Gabriel Rayom, and he did all of his 4 reps right-handed. And maybe the most interesting or disturbing, however you want to look at it, characteristic of the scoring that happened is, at this point, it says 12 points, which gave him a total of 57. The overall for him was listed at 67. He got a 10-point gift. And when we talk about the final standings, I don't think they ever took it away. So the placing ended up being substantially wrong for him, as far as I could tell. And I watched it 3 or 4 times. I can't see where I went wrong, and I've talked to some other creators who agree. Kevin Ferris walks away with 12 points on the Circus Dumbbell, and he went last against Evan Singleton. 12 points went to Brian Shaw, and he had 4 reps. He was versus JF Caron. So 4 reps for Brian. He missed tries on either hand for a 5th rep. And then JF Caron comes in with 14 points, 5 reps on the Circus Dumbbell. I did not think anybody would beat Brian Shaw, JF included, but JF did. He beat him with 5 reps. And the thing that made me sad was on that 5th rep, that last rep that JF put up, the camera panned away for some reason. So I don't know if something exciting happened or, something that caught the cameraman's attention, but I didn't get to see the last rep. And JF is probably the guy I rooted for the most in this competition, him and Bobby Thompson. And so I was pretty sad to not be able to see that rep. 15 points go to Trey Mitchell, and Trey does 6 reps. He ended up going alone, which I think was at the very beginning, so no one to go head-to-head with. Still puts up 6 reps. And then Evan Singleton ends up winning it with 7 reps. Evan went last against Kevin Ferris. He knew he had to beat Trey's 6. He did beat Trey's 6. And another reason you should watch this show if you want to learn technique is Evan Singleton's first Circus Dumbbell rep is perhaps the most beautiful Circus Dumbbell rep I've ever seen. Some of it is his showmanship and his facial expression, but you definitely should watch for that reason. And so that's how the Circus Dumbbell shook out. So now we talk about the last event, the Atlas Stones. Again, Misha Shivlikov did not compete. Big Z did not compete. We then have Gabriel Pena, who scored 1 point, but I believe should have scored 5 points on the Atlas Stones, and here's why. So he went against Jerry Pritchett. He finished 3 stones much faster than Jerry Pritchett did, but Gabriel Rayom did 1 stone less and got 2 more points than Gabriel. So something really wrong going on with the points here as well. One of the multiple different areas where the scoring seemed really off. Gabe was faster than Jerry Pritchett to 3 stones, and Jerry got 5 points, but Gabriel got 1. So doing a little process of elimination, I believe 5 points was correct for Gabriel, but to give you what actually happened in the actual placings, he got 1. 3 points went to Gabriel Rayom. He was against Graham Hicks, and he completed 2 stones. 4 points to Bobby Thompson, who, again, clutching his shoulder, clutching his left bicep. He did complete 3 stones, though. Then you go up to Jerry Pritchett, who got those 5 points and I believe should have had 4. So he wasn't off by as much. He got a 1-point gift, whereas Gabriel Pena got mixed up with a few guys and got a 4-point deficit. And then Jerry actually did seem very excited after the 3. I think maybe with his injuries, he didn't feel like he'd get it, and he did. But then time ran out. He didn't get to attempt a 4th. Evan Singleton walks away with 6 points versus Brian Shaw. He finished 3 stones, and he was shaking his forearm. So a lot of different kind of injuries going on during this competition. Konstantin Janasha with 7 points. He could barely walk. He collapsed after the 4th stone, but he did the 4th stone. Super brave. He went against Maxime Boudreau. Dr. Todd McDougall, the renowned strongman chiropractor, and Becky the Body Whisperer were both there trying to help him walk off, and he didn't want any help. He's a true warrior. Unbelievable, Konstantin Janasha. Then we move up to JF Caron, who did 4 stones for 8 points. He bobbled the 2nd stone. So again, I don't know how many, if that would have made a placing difference, but maybe that and the other thing we mentioned earlier, maybe those things add up to change his placing 1 place. Who knows? But he did bobble that 2nd stone, finished 4, did not get the 5th. Graham Hicks with 10 points. He went against Gabriel Rayom and got 4 stones as well. 11 points to Adam Bishop. He was versus Ivar Smokstellis. He lapped the 5th one but couldn't get it up. So Adam, as you remember, did very well in the Giants Live show with the lighter set of stones. This heavier set giving him a little bit of trouble, but still got 4 up and, somewhat close to the 5th. Somewhat close to the 5th. Ivar Smokstellis walks away with 12 points. He was against Adam Bishop. Again, got all 5 stones. And then we have all the guys who got all 5 stones. So Kevin Ferris with 13 points. 14 points to Maxime Boudreau, who went against Constantine and finished all 5 pretty fast. And then Brian Shaw, 15 points for him. So he won motion the first 3 stones and did finish all 5 of them. And then the winner, Trey Mitchell, so Brian put him up in 33.09 seconds, which was really fast. And then high drama at the Shaw Classic for Trey Mitchell, who ends up finishing it in 28.04 seconds. We were waiting a minute or two to hear the timings because these 2 placings meant a lot in the final overall standings. And speaking of the final overall standings, let's have a look at how it shook out. So Mikhail Shivlikov ends up in 16th place. I believe with the points mix-ups, he really should have been in 15th place. His points were 22.5, which I agree with. I just feel like Jerry Pritchett, who ended up in 15th place, should have actually been last in 16th because he was given 23 points and I believe deserved 22 because of that Atlas Stone mix-up. Moving on up, 14th place went to Gabriel Pena, so he was given 23.5 points, and because of that Atlas Stone scoring mix-up, I think should have had 27.5 points, but it would not have changed his placing. He would still be 14th place. Gabriel Rayom comes in 13th place, and I agreed with that placing. 32 points total for him. We then have 12th place Big Z, Zydrunas Savickas, the GOAT of strongman, and so he ends up in 12th place, and again, 36 points for just 1 day of work is, I think, would stack up really well. So if we were to say he'd do just as well on day 2 and double that, let's see where that score would have landed him. Moving up the list, Graham Hicks ends up in 11th place with 56.5 points. The other little pet peeve I had is they were giving us points for each event and then overall point standings all along until the Atlas Stones, where they didn't give us the points, and then they gave us overall standings points but not Atlas Stones points, so it made it difficult to follow the math along, especially because some of the other numbers were not necessarily correct or trustworthy. With Constantine, they were calling out, and I know they did it to build the suspense, but with Constantine, they called out each guy starting off in 16th place and had them come out and line up in their placings. And with Constantine, they didn't say his points. They didn't say his total points, which for me, I had him at 59, but they didn't say his total points. So that was really interesting. They basically said, oh, the walking wounded, and kind of played up his bravery, which they should, but difficult. That's why the question mark's there. So then we go up to an interesting part. So 9th place went to Maxime Boudreau, who I believe should have been in 8th place with his 70 points, and here's why. Work our way up, and Adam Bishop also wrong. 8th place, I believe he should have been 7th with his 74 points. Then you have Bobby Thompson, who was in 7th, and I believe he should have been in 6th. And here's why. Because Ivar Smokstellis finished 6th, and I believe he should have been in 9th for the aforementioned 10-point gift. He ends up with 79 points, and I added it up over and over and over again, and I think it's really is 69 points. So those are the placings that were wrong. Evan Singleton ends up in 5th with 80 points. Fourth place goes to Kevin Ferris with 83 points, and here's your podium. Third place goes to JF Carone, who was first going into the Atlas Stone, so high suspense there. He ends up with 99 points. Second place to the host, Brian Shaw, who a lot of people thought would win this show. He came damn close. Second place, 101.5 points for Brian. And the winner, the champion of the 2021 Shaw Classic, is Trey Mitchell, Charles Mitchell III. They kept saying the third over and over again, but Trey Mitchell, as we all know him, wins the Shaw Classic. Congratulations to Trey. 104.5 points for him, and he has just a really consistent result after result. And again, let's take another recap look at what Trey did in this particular contest. So he ends up with 15.5 points in the log. He ends up with 15 points in the super yoke. In the bag toss, he ends up with 11 points in the bag toss. The car squat for Trey Mitchell, 14 points there. So big numbers everywhere. Trey was good all around. Looking at him at the Hummer Tire deadlift, 13 points there. The medley, probably his worst event, the only one he didn't do super well at. And said he had 12, 5 points there. So the only one he didn't do particularly well at. Circus Dumbbell, 15 points there. And then he wins the Atlas Stone. So congratulations to Trey Mitchell for an incredibly consistent performance and winning the 2021 Shaw Classic. So I hope you found this detailed analysis helpful and useful for you to get a picture in your mind of all the incredible action we saw, and compelling enough to go to the Shaw Elite Club and buy it and watch it. You have to see it in person. I come close with my detailed analysis, but you have to see it in person. So thanks for joining me. Keep your eye out for that highlight, lowlight video coming soon. And of course, as always, until next time, ciao, homie.